Hi, you tuned in for the Power and Energy News Channel ESI Africa. For this episode, I am speaking with Mark Carrato, who is the Power Africa coordinator from the US. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
So, Mark, I want to start off with a very basic question around Power Africa supporting the just energy transition in Africa. What is the focus at the moment? Because Power Africa has been around for a number of years. So what are we looking at in terms of the just energy transition?
Sure. I mean, I think I like kind of where you went with that. Hopefully, we've been supporting a just energy transition for what is now nearly a 10-year run since the beginning. Certainly the tenets of what we believe in terms of a just, equitable way of getting 580 million, or arguably more after COVID, people access to energy, the right systems to get it done and so forth is critical. I think now we've always been there, but I think even now more so this means to do it in a climate-friendly way, in a clean and green way, which we're excited about. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but because this is where the market's going. The market has been going for a while. So, you know, it's always nice when your two goals line up. They're mutually reinforcing. So you're not going to get a just energy transition without a green pathway, and you're not going to get green pathway without a just energy transition, right? So we've been working at this for a long time, as I said, on both sides of the enabling environment, the systems that are needed, and then on the other side to facilitate the private sector investment in addition to monies that come from donors and governments, because that will never be enough to actually fuel this, right? That innovation, that experience from the private sector side. So to date, I think we've helped connect more than 145 million people to power for the first time, so we're awfully proud of that. We do this in a form of a partnership, as you know. So it's not us, it's that partnership. It's not only the 12 US government agencies that do this, but it's the 20 development partners who have signed up, and then more than 170 companies who have specified with some intent, or have intended with some specificity what it is they can do to driving this goal. So that partnership has mobilized $61 billion so far. So that's serious money, and it's going to take serious money, as we know, to get a just energy transition across the continent.
Right. I do want to touch a little bit on COVID-19 and how that impacted the performance of Power Africa in managing in the field what's happening in getting people connected.
Sure. Oh man, big question. Like anything else, what a curveball, right? On a personal level, I started as Power Africa coordinator about 2 weeks after the U.S. government decided to see if they could go back and do things virtually. And through that, that's tough, right? It's tough to get teams out there. It's tough to get motivated to figure out how to, on a dime, change the way you get things done. But you're right. We're super proud of where we're gone. On some levels, some of our numbers, as it were, from 20 to 21 doubled in terms of what we're able to do. The critical part, as you said, though, is that everyone was at home, right, and trying to do things in a new way. So people who need to service systems, people who need to go out there and do investment surveys and look about how they stack projects, government officials who need to visit their programs and or have those conversations, all that stopped or slowed down dramatically, right? So we try to figure out innovative ways like the rest of the world to get around that. So it's been a challenge, but we're there, we're excited. I think we've pivoted very well. To some extent, because the way we're just structured as a coordinator's office, we already had a split team over 2 continents. Half our team sits in Africa. In fact, more than half if you take the extended team. So we had some practice a little bit on working through virtual platforms. But another way to answer this question, I think, interestingly enough, is what we chose to focus on as well. So not only do we have the same goals, and we're still going after the megawatts and the access, and then we added climate in there as a much more concerted focus, though historically we've always been, because the market's been going there, we've been, I think, somewhere between 70 and 80% by number of projects been a renewable program since the very beginning. And that's increasing. That's far dramatically. In fact, I can barely think of a non-renewable project we've even been part of in a good long while. Doesn't mean we won't, but that's just the way the market's going. But in addition, a couple things we had been working on before that we said, hey, like the rest of the world, we got to take stock. This is a challenge of our time, not only climate, but now with COVID, was health facility electrification. So we said we've been since Ebola and arguably before. Everyone knows the connection between energy and power. You don't deliver babies in the dark. You don't do a telemedicine consult in a rural area. You don't maintain workers at health clinics without energy. You don't digitize health records. You don't keep vaccines cold, et cetera, et cetera. And COVID hit, and it just massive exclamation point on that. So we have a real definitive effort now on the advocacy side with a group called ESI for All out of the UN to advocate for health facility electrification with it's called a UN Energy Compact, where we put a number out there together of trying to organize a space for 25,000 clinics. And then We Power Africa immediately redirected money, looked at opportunity costs of what we're doing and saying this is important enough, let's do X amount. Innovated within our own programs, have done about 225 clinics to date, serving about 2 million people. But more importantly, or as importantly I should say, we try to look about what the model was, because this is not an area where it's been easy, right? It's not easy to go and find a profitable way, and by that I mean a sustainable way, for people to invest in health clinics. A rural health clinic is a tough person to mix money with. So how do you crowd in other productive use? How do you look at digitization? How do you look at maybe having even further community electrification by looking at a health clinic as an anchor? And with that, then we're starting a very large public-private partnership where we're going to go after 10,000 clinics. And we're about ready to hit go on that. We've been designing for a while and ready to go.
Right, so there's a lot happening at Power Africa. And I was going to ask you about what do you see as essential to accelerating the JET process. I think you've answered a lot in that already. But if you were to pinpoint that thing, what is it that we should be looking at?
Well, there's a couple things. There's two sides of this coin, so I'll kind of hit a little bit of both, and these are going to be overly simplified answers because they're complicated questions. One is, so at the end of the day, the coin is bankable projects, private sector investment to push forward sovereign need on electrification and so forth, and to do it in a just way. We talked about that. So it's very first thing we always remember is that we got to have that just lens first. Who's losing, who's gaining, how do we make it a net win, right? And we've shown, and we heard Andre de Ruyter yesterday speak on behalf of South Africa with the partnership that we're part of in South Africa, that the job outlook is better. In fact, it's really, really better if you look at the World Bank study, but in others, there's more jobs to be going down the green than holding on to what increasingly will be hard to maintain, both in terms of the infrastructure in South Africa, but in terms of where finance is going to go. Finance is not going to continue to finance coal, period. I mean, in fact, it's not going to, and other fossil fuels are going to become harder and harder. So knowing that you're going toward a more job growth situation instead of a less job growth, that's one big part, and I think that's part of the just. In a more technical sense, a couple things have to happen. Battery storage has to be part of the equation, and it's coming, right? I think the prices have dropped 90% from 2010 to 2020. The hours are getting longer, 4 hours, 8 hours. As soon as you get to that holy grail and don't know exactly what that is, you're going to change the way renewables can be on the grid. It's going to change that baseload conception of what power needs to be for an overall system, right? So that's one for sure. The other is transmission. We need to continue to work on how we connect to one another. So if you want to have variable energy and you might have one resource and someone else has a baseload, you can wheel and move that power around in a much better way. It's expensive. We need to figure out privatized ways to build those lines in addition to always trying to go back to the exchequer to pay for a line, right? On the other side, we need the private sector, I think, to realize, we need to create the bankable projects, right? But I think we also need to kind of look at how we evaluate risk in the market as well. And probably a time to get in there and look at it in a different way. One particular place I'd be focused on here is distributed renewable energy. So the on-off grid is a bit of an old nomenclature. It still exists and it always will on some level, but to some extent it's power and power to people. This idea of mini grids and metro grids in a space like DRC where you can really put on some metro grids, put tens of thousands of people on a decentralized system, the renewable source, that space is still pretty nascent. And because of it, the risk tolerance is less and the return need is higher, right? We need to keep pushing that down, showing these are not only bankable solutions, they're part of the future construct. So as grids can take on baseload because of batteries, as transmission improves and we can move that power around more easily, and as we have other systems that blur that line between on and off grid, all those things as they become more investable, the better off we'll be. That is part of the heart of what just energy transition needs to be. Because as I said yesterday, to take 20 to 22 gigs of coal off a system, you need to put 50 to 60 plus 10 or more of battery on it just to replace that. So we have to grow at levels we've never grown. That's more power than South Africa has on its grid currently.
Right, and it is a long-term process that we're going to go through. And I like the fact that you mentioned transmission. It's one of the key points that we do cover in ESI Africa, and I think that we tend to forget about transmission and that we need to invest in that as well, as the generation power plants, the renewable energy, and of course distributed energy resources. Right. That's the big thing that's coming up. So lastly, Mark, what are the new technologies or enhancement of existing technologies that hold promise in accelerating this just energy transition?
Well, I hit on one already. I mean, I think battery storage really is right at the heart of this conversation. But in addition to battery storage, there's things like smarter management, right? So efficiency comes into this as well. Like we're working, and there's a company called Smart Grid that looks at better ways of managing it. So one of the problems is that we lose too much of what we do generate, right? So commercial loss, technical loss, smart meter, I'm thinking, it does smart grids. On how we do it. So if you could get better efficiency on delivering the power you are generating, wasting less of it for whatever reason, managing your customers better, knowing better how to do this, so you can have that perfect balance point of cost-reflective tariff to keep the system whole, and affordability for people who need to afford it. Right? As you drive those two things closer and hopefully down, a lot of it's going to be the management. So there's so many new technologies coming out on how to do that better. Whether it's company like Nextracker moving, tracking the sun with the solar panels to get that much more efficiency, or new inverters on panels, and the technology is moving everywhere so quickly. So battery, anything in the green space. And then as I mentioned in a panel just a minute ago too, someone asked a question about youth. It's also just going and looking and listening to these ideas that are coming out of youth voices and African youth voices at that, right? Taking an idea like mobile money, which was largely pioneered here in Africa, and then spinning that into infinite new business models. The home solar revolution, as it were, was basically born on the back of the ability to figure out a way to aggregate payments in a way that was far more efficient than going and collecting money, right? So here you have a whole entire clean energy play that's absolutely critical to electrification, based on the back of another innovation coming out of an African idea. So these are critical spots. So I think there's, we can name 50 or 60 of these that might be the next big idea.
Right, and I know that at Power Africa you're looking at all of these innovations and seeing how you can then expand it into various countries across Africa.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent what we do, I mean, as I say, I think proudly, is like, we're subsidy, right? I mean, we're U.S. taxpayers who have chosen to through our system to say that this is important enough to us and to the world to get this done. So we're free money in a sense. Whenever we put money into a system, we're outside the market, right? But we got to be smart about that then, right? So we got to be smart subsidy, and we got to be catalytic, right? So we try to, another one I like is like, we don't follow the market, we try to read it really closely and accelerate it. So if something can get done in 10 years, if I can do it in 5, because I put the smart subsidy on that new technology that no one's quite willing to do yet, or we guarantee a loan, or we seed a fund, we do something that pushes that boundary in a way that we know the market's going. And right now there's so many obvious market signals. I mean, you hear the 130 trillion or whatever it is in climate finance, market signal. You know that at the end of the day, renewable is going to be the place to go. You see input prices coming through the floor. I mentioned the battery one, the solar panels, everything on that is dropping. So it's kind of easy to throw the dart at the wall right now to know where to go generally. The complication is then how do you get there in a way that's bankable along the way and iterative, and takes and acknowledges the fact this is a complicated landscape. I didn't mention the other side of the equation of that coin, which is what governments and the rest of us need to do in terms of pushing best practice and enabling environments, transparent frameworks, better procurement, the right energy tariff regulation, smart energy planning. As much as you make that transparent and focused, it'll become predictable. And when predictability happens, the private sector will invest their capital. I guess one last way to look at it, it kind of dawned on me earlier, is that I don't know about you, but I am absolutely dependent on Google Maps now. Right? I get in the car. I used to be really good at knowing where I was going, and now I just like blindly. It tells me to turn on 33rd Street. I'm turning on 33rd Street. I mean, I know I'm not thinking about it. But to some extent, that's not a good way to plan something as infinitely complicated as bringing power to 580 million people, right? We have to be a little bit more compass point. Like, I know I need to get there. I got to make sure I'm always following the compass to the right spot, and then I'll be smartly opportunistic with those strategic barriers on how I can push that further, knowing that at times regulations don't get passed, or knowing at times a company passes on a sound investment, and so on and so forth. So how do we, as Power Africa, then, again, go use that smart subsidy, be the catalyst, reading the market signals to push the market faster? Because at this time, maybe I shouldn't have turned on 33rd Street. If I just ignored Google, I would go up to the next one and turn on 44th, and maybe I end up getting there faster. Right? So, my point is that compass point is absolutely critical. So we have to have that set right. I think we do. There's points along the way we know we need to stop. Distributed renewable energy, battery storage, better mix of renewables, better integration on the grids, better technical capacity, better policy environments. If we pass those waypoints, we'll get there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching. Like, share and subscribe to ESI Africa for more of this type of content.